So I think now we'll just maybe go on to sort of how to identify the best processes for automation. So as you can see on the screen, there's about 8 different identifiers, and these are just key identifiers. I mean, there's definitely more than just these. But as we know, robots perform manual tasks based on a set of steps which do not change. So they're rule-based. And your best identifiers and the best use cases are repetitive processes that have very little variation. Processes which require decision making are not good use cases, because at the end we want an end-to-end seamless automation, and we don't want to have any human interaction in between, because it's not going to be a solid end-to-end process of automation. So robots are built through a set of instructions, and they can handle if-else situations. So it's your true and false, your yes, no, you're doing X or do Y, but it is not limited to just one decision. It can be multiple decisions that find us at where our desired end location. And high volume and frequency of tasks obviously is going to increase your benefit of automation. And the one thing we do look for is we look for electronic inputs. So Excel spreadsheets, databases, this will obviously yield better results. A great example of how we identified a process at a client, they came to us with this sort of use case. And if you, as I'm speaking through it, try to think whether it would be a good or not use case to automate. So they do what's called daily take-ins. This is for a veterinary organization, and this veterinary organization has 700 plus clinics associated to it. On a daily basis, the clinic has to go onto an Excel spreadsheet, input their daily take-ins, and email through to the back office team, the daily take-ins teams. So the daily take-ins teams is receiving 700 plus of these Excels on a daily basis. They have to take each Excel, put it onto a master sheet, and from that master sheet, create an import and put it into their finance system. So if you think about that, that's 700 different sheets a day across the whole week. Across the month, you're looking at about 15,000 or just under 15,000 volumes. So just from that, you can see, we know that's a high volume process. It's very manual, it's repetitive, it's the same task over and over again. It's rule-based, and it's a mature and stable process. So straight away, we know it's a great candidate for automation.
It's Mark here. I think also what's really interesting is, from our perspective, some of these things, when you look at that, evolution scale, some of the things that we find clients really benefit from is relatively simple stuff. It's amazing how many of us have to update or complete spreadsheets or forms and send them in for weekly or monthly reporting and KPI packs. Say that businesses do still run on Excel spreadsheets and emails. And what we find is even simple automations like that, where you're monitoring regular updates or regular spreadsheets and then consolidating them and updating them into systems. That we've got one client where we're doing that, and that's saving them, many hours a week. So, but it's not that complicated. It's actually relatively straightforward to implement. And I just wonder whether, is anybody, I know this is like a relatively informal session, so please, be prepared to share if you want to. Is anybody doing anything with automation at the moment along those lines, or is this really, quite new for people?
Hi, it's Kirsty here. So just a bit of background from me. I work in network operations, and we have a big challenge around automation. We don't do a huge amount of it at the moment. We have quite a lot of human interaction in our processes, which is obviously a challenge. But the question I wanted to ask is, we see opportunities we've got double keying. You can imagine with a huge organization like BT, we have a lot of legacy tools. And as we bring organizations together, there's a need for tools to interface, which can be a costly process and can take quite a long time. So in the interim, we put double keying in. Is that something that you've seen with other clients, which is possible for automation?
Yeah, I mean, I think we see that all the time, particularly with all the technology where integrations aren't able to be built. I mean, I think you need to always evaluate it. Integration is probably the first, you would always look to do that first.
Yeah.
If it's not possible, then certainly RPA is a perfect way of doing that, and replicating what a user is doing, and particularly keying data across multiple systems is something that we do see, and exactly how you would deploy a bot now to do that. I mean, we talked a little bit about it at the start, which is about how it's triggered. So either it's user triggered in the assisted way, we double click and they run an executable and they can see it doing it for them. And that really, as we sort of talked about, gives people confidence that the bot is doing what they expect. And then what we typically see is a transition from this sort of attended bot to an unattended, because they then know it will help them and do what they need it to do. So therefore they don't worry about it. So certainly that double keying of data is a perfect use case, particularly on older technology. The way that the technology looks at it, there's different ways in which the screens are presented in the bot so that they can actually identify. So it's not around pixels and things like this. They have what they call elements, which are presented in the user interface, and we can then take those. So it's not all about sort of, oh my word, the screen's going to be slightly different size. Is it going to work for you or not? Typically what we find is that we can work with RPA or with UiPath to actually bring that data through in a very automated way, without sort of huge amounts of exceptions.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think Kirsty, just picking up on that, I think it's a great example. I get so frustrated when you sit with clients and you can see there are lots of people just double keying all over the place, and as much as we might want to move into a world where there's a single version of the truth and a single integrated system, there's a lot of businesses, especially more complex ones, that are a million miles away from that, actually. But simple, techniques to then make sure that people are only entering one piece of data once, and then it's, essentially the robot is passing that data through to the other systems. That can save people a huge amount of time, but obviously also there's significant error reduction in that as well. We all know that rekeying constitutes quite a lot towards kind of data errors and quality issues.
Yeah. Okay.
And another example is actually in sort of call center environments where when you're calling in, they're able to put your name into one place and basically then bring up the data for you across multiple systems that are not necessarily integrated. So it's a way of returning lots of data from multiple systems through a single view by using a bot to do that, rather than having to have all these different systems integrated in the background.
Yeah, Michael, Jeff, I think some of the examples we might talk about later as well are very much around that, aren't they? Movement of data and stopping that duplication of effort. So we can talk about some of those a bit later on in the presentation as well.
I have a question too, if I may. You make it very clear that having a stable system and process is key to that, but we all know that everything changes. Either we're initiating improvements or our partners and product sets change. So if you're using an RPA bot, how easy is it for us as users to update that to reflect changes in process, or is this a skill set that requires something beyond the average finance person?
Happy to take that one, Paul.
Yeah, okay, Mike.
Sure. Hi, Joe. I think there's sort of a few layers and answers to that question. I mean, what we'd like to do first off when we see a process is go through a short process of Lean Six Sigma, just to ensure that we are automating what we would consider a lean process. So we'd like to think that that process is optimized by the time we've created the robot. But obviously, like you said, that there are certain changes that need to be made, depending on process changes, etc. So what we do is with every bot comes a config file. So we'll make sure that certain things we identify in a process that could potentially be configurable, like a file path, a date, a couple of examples, you could then actually update yourself manually in an Excel spreadsheet. And then, like we said, if it really is a drastic process change and lots of different clicks on the screen will change, then we would hopefully have embedded that in your organization through the Automation Center of Excellence, and there would be that capability in-house, which we would build along. So it sort of is a layered approach, but hopefully we'll never get to that point.
Yeah, and clearly for some organisations, the Automation Centre of Excellence won't be the right answer, and of course we can put some form of support management in place. So we can cover all angles.
Thank you.